far as you know, you don't have it.
Jeez, Chris.
I'll be in my office.
Yeah.
We good? Okay, staff is ready to begin the meeting. Mr. Newell, if you could, as chair, if you could call the meeting to order.
Are you ready to do that?
Ready.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Clark County Regional Flood Control District Citizens Advisory Committee of April 30th, 2020. First item on the agenda is comments by the public.
And I'll go ahead and take over.
I don't
If that's
think-
okay, I'll go ahead and take over and just read the items. I just wanted you to call the meeting to order. Okay?
All right, you want to take the meeting over from here, Steve?
Yes, please. So I'll ask all the members to unmute your mics now, but try not to make too much noise. But you'll need to have your mics unmuted so that we can hear you vote. I also want to ask all of you, if you have to leave the meeting before it's over, just interrupt me or whoever's talking and just tell us that you're leaving the meeting so that we can note that for the record that you've left the meeting. If we see anyone drop off that doesn't make an announcement, we'll try to stop, and you'll have to work with us a little bit if there's technical difficulties, but it looks like so far everything is going pretty good. So,
Steve, this is Larry Schultz. I have a quick question.
Sure.
If we if we have a point to make or we want to raise our hands, how do we do that in go-to meeting?
We'll read each item and I'll ask for discussion. I'll ask if there's any discussion, and you have an opportunity to speak at that time on each item.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to start with some housekeeping. On March 22nd, 2020, the governor's office issued a declaration of emergency, Directive 006, which suspended the requirement in Nevada revised statute that there be a physical location for meetings of public bodies. Emergency Directive 10 extended that Directive 6 until April 30th, so that's today, 2020. So pursuant to both of those directives, the Regional Flood Control District did not provide a physical location for this public meeting. This meeting is being live streamed, and you can watch the meeting at www.ccrwcd.org/stream.htm. Public comments were accepted via public comment at regionalflood.org email address. Anyone wishing to comment to the public had an opportunity to do so before the meeting. So we'll now check to see if there are any public comments that have been submitted.
No, there's not.
Let the record reflect that no public comments were submitted. And with that, we can move on. Oh, I need to do roll call. Sorry. So I'm going to call everyone's name. If you could say you're here when I call your name out, and we'll get an accurate record of who's on the line. We are monitoring it here in the office, but again, if you need to step out of the meeting, please let us know when you do that, so we'll know who's voting and who's not. First up is James Houts. If you could unmute your mic and say if you're here.
I'm here.
Thank you. Jeff Lastowska.
Yep, I'm here.
Ed Euling.
Yes, I'm here.
Ron Newell. I know it's here.
Yes.
Larry Schultz.
Present and accounted for.
Marshall Desai.
I'm here.
Jim Giordano.
I'm here.
Bill Starmer. Oh, I think we lost Bill. There he is. Bill Starmer.
Yep, I'm back. Cox is having trouble with their internet, so I may come and go.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on you. Norm Ashford.
Here.
And Karina Berrigan.
I'm here.
Okay, great. So we have all members present, and we do have a quorum. Item number, we already did item number 1 is comments by the general public. There are no comments that have been submitted by the general public. Item number 2 is action to approve the agenda with the deletion of any items. The agenda is in order for approval. Is there any discussion on the agenda?
I have one comment.
Okay.
This is James Houts. I'm so new and I haven't come to the orientation yet, and I've looked through all of the materials sent to me, and I even perused the master plan on your website, but I don't feel comfortable voting yet. So today I'll probably be abstaining in most cases.
Okay, if you want to, well, is that okay, Chris? Yeah. If you want to abstain on an item, you just let us know when we call for a vote, and we'll note that for the record that you're abstaining.
Yes, until I get up to speed, I'll probably do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
This is Larry Schultz. I move to accept the agenda as presented.
We have a motion by Larry Schultz to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Abstain.
opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay. That motion is approved unanimously with 1 abstention. Item 3 is action to approve the minutes of the March 2nd, 2020 meeting. Mr. Chair, the minutes are in order for approval. Any discussion?
Motion to approve as presented.
That was Ron Newell, sorry. There's a motion
Yes.
on the floor by Ron Newell for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Since I was not in attendance at that meeting, I'm going to abstain.
Every time.
Is it gonna be the same one?
So,
Well, it's easier if even if people make a motion, if they just say their name first and then the motion.
just a reminder, when you make a motion, if you could just say your name when you start to speak. Actually, if you say any comments, if you say your name before you start talking, that will help us keep the record straight. Item 4 is action to accept the financial reports. The report is in your backup. I do want to let you know that we just received the sales tax information for February. We just got it this morning, so we didn't get a chance to send it out to the committee. But I'll let you know that the February sales tax revenues were $8,393,002.84, which is $136,026.12 above what was estimated for the month of February, which is a 1.65%. It's 1.65% higher than what was estimated. So on the year thus far through February, we're 4.46% above what we had estimated. With that, if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them on the financial reports, and otherwise staff would recommend to accept the report. Is there any discussion?
So this is Larry Schultz. This is Larry Schultz, and I have a question and some observation, and this probably relates to both agenda item 4 and agenda item 6. I noticed from a financial perspective, there was a downward projection on tax revenue of 9.5%, and there may have been some other economic changes that may have occurred based on inflation assumptions or spending assumptions or whatever. I'm not sure about that, but I also noticed that there's a memo from Todd to you, Steve, in agenda item 6. But so my question is this, and if we need to defer this to agenda item 6, that'll be fine. Number 1, is the downward projection of 9.5% adequate given the current financial and economic situation in the state? And 2, are there offsetting measures to counteract that downward projection. And if we want to defer that discussion to agenda item 6, I'm fine with that.
Larry, I think we will defer that to item 6, even though that's there's not gonna be any action on item 6, unless there's questions, but I think it'd be better to discuss that then.
Okay, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Ron Newell to accept the financial reports. Move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Newell to accept the financial reports. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
James Houts abstains.
Motion is approved unanimously with 1 abstention. Item number 5 is action to adopt amendments to the 10-year construction program. Mr. Chair, these are amendments to the 10-year program for fiscal impacts that occur later in this agenda. Staff recommend approval. Is there any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Bill Stormer.
Ron Newell.
I think I heard Bill Starmer made a motion
Yes, I'll make the motion
to approve.
to approve it. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Mr. Starmer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
James Houts abstains.
That motion is approved unanimously with one abstention. Item 6 is discussion and possible action to approve the prioritization of projects 10-year construction program and fiscal year 2020-2021 project list. So this item is pretty typical of us to put a reminder in on the agendas for the months leading up to when we approve the 10-year construction program to give, it's really a reminder to the entities that we submitted or we distributed the draft 10-year construction program to them to allow them to fill it out with their projects that they want to program. That has been done, and so they've completed their part of the project, and they've submitted those back to the regional flood control district, and we're in the process, staff is, of compiling those different 10-year construction programs from each of the entities and see how it's affected, or how many projects we can get programmed onto the 10-year construction program. Going back to your questions, Mr. Schultz, so the 9.5% you see is a reduction in current year sales tax revenue as a result of the downturn that we're expecting in the economy. So the last 3.5 months, basically from mid-March through June, we're going to see a pretty substantial decrease in sales tax revenue. We did estimate, or we reduced the sales tax estimate for FY20 based on the concern that those revenues would be reduced. It was difficult for us to determine how much to reduce it at the time because we had to get this really done, and we were finalizing it in February and early March when this thing kind of was taking off. So we didn't have a whole lot of information going into the next budget to know what to put in for the sales tax reduction. So this was kind of our best estimate at the time. The thing is, though, because most of our expenditures are construction. Operating costs, maintenance costs, and our debt service are smaller components of our expenditure authority. So what we'll do as we go through the rest of this year and into next year is monitor how much sales tax we're actually getting, and we're going to adjust our expenditures mostly through construction. So you're going to see a metering of construction new start funding for the last cycle of this year, of this fiscal year, and then into FY21, and we'll adjust the projects we're authorizing and approving for funding for construction accordingly, depending on the actual revenues we get. So it's important to try to be as accurate as possible with those projections, but we have the flexibility and the ability in our program to be able to adjust kind of almost on the fly. We'll do it on a monthly basis practically, analyzing how much revenue we're getting and what projects can be approved and what projects can't. I do fully expect that we're gonna have a revenue shortfall and that we're gonna have a waiting list for projects for construction funding here, probably in the first few months of the next fiscal year. And we'll see where we go from there. But does that answer your question?
Just an additional follow-up. So if I look at the agenda item 6 backup material, and I look at Todd's memo to you dated March 26th, and it's a very in-depth and detailed set of assumptions and factors. Did any of those factors and assumptions take into consideration the current economic climate due to the pandemic, or is that memo to be revised, and are the resultant impacts from that memo as it results on the projects, is that something to be done in the future, or is you feel comfortable with what you have?
Well, we really have one shot at this. This is an inflation factor memo. So what we use this memo for is to determine what kind of a percent inflation we should apply to construction estimates throughout the 10-year construction program from year 1 all the way through year 10. And so what we're doing in this memo is kind of taking a look at the economy, looking at how things are going, and up until February everything was going great. And so we were anticipating really when we have a good economy and things are growing, the inflation, particularly on construction, goes up. And so we have higher inflation factors in our memo when we're having a good strong economy. In this case, we learned of the downturn towards the end of March, and so what we wound up doing was revising our inflation factors downward, anticipating a drop in construction costs for like the first year, the second year, the third year, and then we kind of went back to about a 3% increase in the out years. So the purpose of this memo is to determine that inflation factor, and once that's in the 10-year construction program, we won't be looking at it again until the next 10-year construction program in the following fiscal year. So we don't really have the ability to revise that after it's approved, coming up at the next board cycle. We'll be presenting the 10-year construction program in detail to this committee and also to our technical advisory committee and the board in our next board cycle for May and June. And so we'll be explaining in detail the 10-year construction program, what's on it, what projects maybe can come forward. So that's the intent. We won't really have the opportunity to change this memo. I wish we did. The timing of the pandemic was not great in terms of budgeting. It happened right as we were at the tail end of our budget process, and so it was difficult and it was a little late to change things. But the good news is, like I was saying before, we have the ability to manage our program and manage how we fund projects just based on the actual revenues we do get. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Steve. That's kind of what I thought, and it sounds like you have a good foundation to proceed based on what we know today. So thank you for the further clarification.
You're welcome. Is there any other discussion on that item?
This is it just doesn't seem to me that 9.5% is going to be very realistic. And it affects, whatever the figure is, it affects a lot of the other things that happen in the rest of the agenda. I'm wondering, it's been a month since the end of March. Isn't there any indication from the state or from the county? I don't know who provides these sales tax figures, but don't they know how the sales tax that was collected in March?
We do not. We know, we only get the sales tax collection, and you know, is 2 months. There's a lag of 2 months. So we just got today the February numbers, and we're at the end of April. So we're not going to know the March numbers until the end of May. because they gotta collect all the tax, they gotta figure out how much it is, they gotta distribute it, and it takes time to do that. And so we don't know what the numbers will be in March, and we won't know that number until the end of May. So, you know, 9.5%, it doesn't sound like much given the current conditions we're in, but keep in mind that the first 8.5 months of the year, we were above our projections. And so we were 4.5% above our projections already. And so we're saying not only are we gonna eat up that extra money that we actually took in over the first 8.5 months, but we're also gonna drop that 9%. And so it doesn't sound very conservative, but I think it'll suit our purposes. And I'll also say that we do have a financial advisor, Hobbs Ong, has been helping us. They've been working with Jeremy Aguero at Applied Analysis to try to come up with some projections of what the sales tax is going to look like over the rest of this fiscal year and also into 2021. So they gave us a pretty detailed analysis of a breakdown of all the different services and you know, for example, restaurants and all these different types of businesses that provide sales tax. And then they estimated what their reduction in sales would be. So we estimated what the reduction in total sales tax would be to try to estimate what our actual, you know, percent reduction would be, or estimate that. So we based our analysis for the rest of this fiscal year on what they provided, how much sales tax they thought we would be bringing in over the next 3.5 months. So it wasn't just a guess, but you know, at this point, no one really knows what the pandemic's going to do. Are we going to start opening in May? Is it going to extend into June? Nobody really knows. What we do know is that since the middle of March, roughly, casinos and hotels have been closed down, and we're going to see a dramatic drop in revenue for the last 3.5 months of the fiscal year. So again, we adjusted that number down. We believe that we'll be able to manage our program based on those revised estimates, and also if it turns out it's less, then we'll adjust our program accordingly, and there'll be less construction starts, and you know, we'll move forward that way.
So Steve, I think what you're saying, this is Jim Giordano. I think what you're saying is that the funding decisions can be adjusted as you move forward and get further information. But what this agenda item is calling for right now is just the prioritization of the projects, right?
That's correct, Jim. You won't be approving the 10-year construction program until the next cycle, but even when you do, you're not approving funding for any projects. All we're approving is the plan to move forward, and that plan can be adjusted all throughout the year. And so if we need to do a mid-year, 10-year plan adjustment, we'll do that. If the revenue is so bad coming in that we have to adjust the 10-year construction program, we'll do that. We did that in 2008 with the recession. We did a mid-year adjustment to the 10-year construction program. We can do that again if necessary. But what we didn't want to do, and again at the time when we were setting all this up, we were right at the beginning of this pandemic, and we didn't know what the extent of it was going to be. So we didn't know if it was going to be like a check mark where we have a drop and then a pretty sharp increase back in revenues because things start opening back up, or if it was going to be more like a swoosh where it's going to drop and then gradually go back up. I think we're getting more to the swoosh than the check mark today, but we didn't know that back when we were setting this up. But again, we have the ability to adjust on the fly depending on the revenues that come in. If it's drastic and we drop the revenues quite a bit, then we'll compensate for that by reducing new construction funding. Keep in mind too that we have $85 million in bonding authority, and if we do get a backlog of projects, if economic conditions are right and we're able to handle the debt service and the interest rates are okay, then we can issue that $85 million in bonding and try to flush that backlog out if it turns out we have to do that. Any other discussion?
Well, this is Ed Yulin again. a number of the things that you're saying concern me. Number one, Jeremy Aguirre is a very political person. He's going to produce what people are going to ask him to produce. And it just amazes me that with him, he does have the figures. He knows what's going on. It's just amazing to me that a whole month after the sales figures and all that for the state are coming in, that they can't provide a much more accurate picture of what's going on. And the public agencies in Clark County tend to react rather than plan out ahead of time. So like the last commission meeting, they were shocked to find out that they have this huge deficit forecast. And that's a lot of that was forecast. We're not even talking about forecast. We're just guessing 9.5%. And it's to me, it's worrisome. And then to say that we're going to borrow the money, the county has borrowed far too much money, and is unable to wow, excuse me, has borrowed far too much money, and that's one of the things that's going to create a huge problem for the whole county. And who knows if they're not going to come and try to take funds away from the regional flood control. I mean, how are they going to pay for the stadium if the room taxes have dried up, which they certainly have? The county then has to pay for that stadium. To me, we should have a lot more accurate information.
Well, I would love to know what the March numbers are myself, but I can tell you that since I've been working at the flood control district, we have never gotten any sales tax information in less than 2 months from when we're supposed to get it. There's a 2-month lag, and it's a lot of work to collect all that money from the different businesses and understand how much each business had to pay in. And I guess in this age of digital age, maybe it should be easier, but for whatever reason, that's just the state's position, and that's just the way it's been. But keep in mind too that even if we had the March numbers today, half of March was fine. We were going along fine, and the last half of March was not fine, and everything started closing up. So it may give us an indication of what's going to happen in the future, but it's not enough information. Even if we had March's numbers, it wouldn't be enough information to go into even to the end of this fiscal year or into the next fiscal year in terms of trying to determine what our revenues are going to be. The bigger issue is what's happening with the pandemic, and are things, we're going to start flattening the curve and going on the downhill slide, and then starting to reopen businesses. And I think with the announcement that the governor's going to make this afternoon that some minor smaller businesses are going to start to reopen on a limited basis, and so I guess that's the beginning of at least getting the economy going again. I'll say this too, that we had a strong financial position going into this pandemic, in that we keep a 2-to-1 coverage on our bonds, and so we're required by law to have a 1-to-1 coverage, and we keep it at 2-to-1 just because we don't want to overextend ourselves and not be able to pay our debt service and comply with our bond covenant. We also keep our operating expenses at 10% or less of revenue. So we do that because we're trying to keep as much money flowing to the projects as we can. And then the last thing I'll say is we're a regional agency. We're a political subdivision of the state. We're not a county department. And so the county can't come in and just take our money because they can't pay their other bills. That money is dedicated. The money we receive is dedicated to the regional flood control district. They just can't. Plus, we have our bond covenants. We have to pay those bonds back, and so that money just can't be taken and used for another purpose. It has to be used for the dedicated purpose of flood control.
Yeah, well, that's encouraging. This is Ed Euling again. That's encouraging to hear. It's a state issue, but for example, and there were 2-1, but the stadium is 3-1, and they're talking about where are we going to get the money. So,
Well, they won't get it from us, Ed.
yeah, right.
But they won't get it from flood control.
Yeah, I don't want to get in too much into the stadium, but they're funded.
That's good news.
May I, this is Larry Schultz. May I suggest we move on?
Good idea.
So this was just a discussion item, basically. There's no action really required on item 6. Item 7 is action to accept the presentation and approve and authorize the general manager to sign an interlocal agreement between the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the district to fund the development of a site-specific criteria for selenium in the Las Vegas Wash. Just by way of a lead-in, we've been working with the state to establish a standard for selenium in the Las Vegas Wash. This is a contract that we're entering into with SNWA that through the Las Vegas Valley Watershed Advisory Committee, they're going to provide funding to this effort, so it's not all regional flood control providing the funding. We did prepare a short presentation, so John Tennant, our environmental mitigation manager, is going to do that presentation for us. John, if you can unmute your phone and start when ready.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Steve. This is John Tennant, Environmental Mitigation Manager for the Regional Flood Control District. Just going to give an update on this water quality criteria for selenium in the Las Vegas Wash. Next slide. So just a little bit of background about selenium. Selenium is a naturally occurring metal that occurs in soils throughout the Las Vegas Valley. And what happens is that as the shallow groundwater rises and moves and discharges in towards the Las Vegas Wash, that selenium dissolves in the groundwater and is carried by that groundwater into the tributaries. So we have very little dilution in the tributaries, which results in high selenium levels in the tributaries. And those selenium levels are higher than existing or proposed criteria, which is why the tributaries are listed on the state's water quality list for the tributaries for selenium. Next slide. Why are we concerned about selenium? Well, the EPA and the state are concerned about selenium because it can cause biological deformities in fish and birds. And you can see the picture there of a fish from the San Francisco area. However, there's no evidence that fish are being impacted in the Las Vegas Wash. And in fact, there have been a number of studies, fish surveys in the Las Vegas Wash over the last 20 years. And they've found no evidence of deformities in any of the fish that they've caught in the Las Vegas Wash that would result from selenium. Next slide. So in May of 2019, the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection provided notice of its intent to revise water quality standards for the Las Vegas Wash. And those standards included a proposal for a new statewide selenium criteria based on US EPA's guidance that was issued in 2016. So basically what they were looking at doing is revising the state standards based on EPA guidance that was published. Next slide. Based on that workshop, the stormwater permittees provided comments and met with NDEP throughout the fall of 2019 to discuss the selenium standards and what the state was proposing to do. Based on the feedback from us, NDEP proposed to revise the selenium standard that would exempt the Las Vegas Wash from the new standards for 3 years. So what they did is they adopted a new standard for the entire state, exempting the Las Vegas Wash for 3 years. And in that 3-year period, they will work with the local permittees to develop a site-specific standard just for the Las Vegas Wash for selenium. And NDEP has also agreed to revisit the tributaries on the 303D list. Next slide. So based on that, the developing site-specific criteria for selenium is highly technical. It requires the assistance of experts in the fields of water quality and ecotoxicology, and that's expertise that we don't have local. In December and January, the district solicited written proposals from 5 different firms with that kind of experience, and those were firms from all over the country, everywhere from Florida to Idaho to Colorado. And then we assembled a review team from the local agencies to review those proposals and completed oral interviews of 2 firms and selected one. Next slide, please. So the district has contracted with Arcadis Incorporated to complete the necessary work to develop the site-specific criteria. The agreement before you today is funding for the local work will come from local agency contributions, as Steve explained in his intro. And we're also getting grant funding from the state via the EPA for $50,000. And we anticipate that the project will take approximately 1 year to complete. Next slide. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thanks, John. Any questions?
Yes, can I, go ahead.
Ed Euling?
This is Ed Euling. So there's no danger to the quality of the water that we're drinking?
No.
Yeah, okay. And if the total cost of this project is $150,000?
It remains to be seen. It just depends on how the process, it's an iterative process. Right now, the estimate is about $100,000, but it just depends on how negotiations go with NDEP. It's going to be a long-term back and forth project. So the initial estimate is $100,000, but it could end up being more.
And that's being paid 100% by the SNWA?
It's being paid through the SNWA by contributions from all the local agencies and then the grant from NDEP. So part of that funding will come from the district.
How much?
About $10,000, I believe, is district contribution.
Okay, thank you.
This is James House.
Hi,
Can I get your name?
John Tennert,
John,
Tennert.
and you're with the, what was your title again?
I'm the Environmental Mitigation Manager for the Regional Flood Control District.
Okay. The reason I interrupted, and I apologize for slowing the meeting down, is this was my career for 30 years, and I have experience with selenium removal. So if there's ever any questions, I think I might be of a resource to you.
Oh, that's great.
You're hired.
And I'm free.
That's fantastic.
Any other discussion? Okay, staff would recommend you accept the project presentation and approve and authorize the general manager to sign the interlocal agreement with the SNWA. Entertain a motion.
This is Mary Schultz, and I would like to make a motion on agenda item 7 to accept the presentation and approve and authorize the general manager to sign the interlocal agreement with the SNWA and the district to fund this project.
We have a motion for approval from Mr. Schultz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
James House abstains.
Motion is approved unanimously with 1 abstention. Thank you. Item 8 is action to approve and authorize the chair to sign a memorandum of agreement between the National Weather Service and the Regional Flood Control District for retrieval of data necessary and essential for the accurate and timely issuances of flash flood and severe thunderstorm warnings for the citizens of Clark County. Now, we had an agreement with the National Weather Service. Basically, what this agreement did was allowed us to put a base station for our flood threat recognition system, which includes all of our rain and water level gauges throughout Clark County, in the National Weather Service building. And this acts as a backup to our system here. If something happens to our system here in our building at the Regional Flood Control District, we have that backup at the National Weather Service at a different location to, conserve our the continuity of data basically from the rain gauges. The National Weather Service does utilize the data that's provided by this equipment as part of their forecasting and just understanding what's happening out in the county during weather events. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion?
Yes, this is Ed Euling. I move to approve.
There's a motion on the floor from Mr. Euling for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
James House abstains.
Thank you. Motion approves unanimously with one abstention. Part 3 of your agenda is discussion or design and construction. Item 9 is Duck Creek, Jones Boulevard, Storm Drain, Clark County. Item A is action to accept the project presentation. We do have Ryan Belsick on the phone to present the project. So Ryan, when you're ready, if you could unmute and begin your presentation.
Great, thank you, Steve. Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Belsick. I'm with Clark County Public Works. I am the project manager of the Duck Creek Boulevard Storm Drain Project, and I will be making the project presentation this afternoon. Next slide. The project is located in the southwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley. It's located south of Blue Diamond, near the intersection of Jones Boulevard and Cactus Avenue. Next slide. The project connects into an existing MPU facility just north of Powell Avenue and extends south approximately 3,600 feet to Con Avenue and includes 14 by 6, 10 by 4, and 10 by 3 reinforced concrete box storm drain. The tributary area to the facility is approximately 1 square mile, and the 100-year design flow is 940 CFS. The MPU facility IDs include DCJB 0, 20, and 43 as shown on this slide. Next slide, please. This slide shows a typical RCB section. There will be precast and cast in place reinforced concrete box on this project. Next slide. The total project cost is $11.6 million. RFCD's portion is $3.5 million. It's contributed $7.8 million. And there's a small portion that is being funded by a developer, and that $128,000. Okay. Design documents are 90% complete. All right-of-way has been obtained, and all necessary local, state, and federal permits, including environmental, have been satisfied. Next slide. Construction schedule includes an award of bid date of September of this year, with an anticipated construction start date of December 2020. The duration is anticipated to be 9 months with a completion date of August 2021. Next slide. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Yes, this is Larry Schultz, Clark County. So just my general question on all these kinds of projects. Do we have any known design risks? And if we do, what are the mitigating strategies?
There are a few design challenges for the project. There are several utilities that we're coordinating with Las Vegas Valley Water District, NV Energy, and several others. We've performed extensive potholing throughout the project corridor. The Jones and Cactus intersections is it's got extensive utilities through that intersection, so we performed quite a few potholes. And then we've worked with adjacent developers along the corridor with ongoing and new development that's coming in.
Thank you.
Where does the RTC come into this?
It's actually a roadway and storm drain project. So we are doing a widening project with a Clark County Regional Flood Control District storm drain facility roadway right of way.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't see how they fit into these projects.
No problem.
This is Jim Giordano. I have just a simple question. Is this being designed and managed by Clark County Public Works, or is with the assistance of a consultant, or is it all being done in-house?
No, it's It's a Clark County Public Works project, and we have retained WSP as the engineering consultant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Ed Lynn. I have a question regarding the financing. Since I think finance is going to become tight in the future, particularly. But this is an example of a project that is created by excessive development in this area, far in excess of what the county is collecting for the public works that have to be done as a result of the development. And in this case, the developer is contributing 100,000 plus for a $12 million project. I'm wondering, is there any consideration being given to causing these developers that are making these huge sums of money, and this is the history of Las Vegas, and the reason that we have this sprawl development going on all the time, is there any consideration being given to charge the developers or the buyers of these houses in these other areas for these public works, rather than putting it on the backs of the existing residents of the valley? Because we get our funding from the sales tax, for example.
Yeah, I can't speak for the roadway portion of the project, but the flood control portion is really being designed to protect existing developments downstream of here. We're collecting flows and in such a manner that we're protecting existing development. So we're not really doing the project to facilitate proposed development. It's more to protect existing development. And so we haven't considered doing any type of impact fee or anything of that nature as a result of development. Our master plan assumes that everything's developed. So we're assuming that all the vacant areas you see on that picture there are developed already. And we size our facilities in such a way that it would accommodate that flow. And in this case, it's kind of a diversion. The flow actually goes to the east from here, and we're collecting it and taking it to the north into that light blue facility you see going up to the north and then to the east. So it's a diversion structure that we're picking flows up and conveying it up and safely containing it in a facility.
And the facility downstream was almost all built by developers.
That's true. If a facility, if a developer comes in prior to one of our facilities being proposed, it's the responsibility of the developer to build the whole thing. So there are facilities that have been built fully funded by developers with no contribution from the Regional Flood Control District at all, and that's a good example. This facility to the north was built all by the developers, and now we're extending it to the south and tying into that. So there is developer interaction with our projects in some situations, and if a developer was coming in and they had a wash going through the middle of their site and we weren't in a position, or the county or the city hadn't programmed a project for that, they would be responsible to protect their development.
So, just to verify, are you saying that that the construction of these tens of thousands of houses to the west of this, the west of I-15, have nothing to do with this project? This project would have had to been done regardless of the construction of all those houses.
Now, what I'm saying is that there's existing development downstream of here that we're protecting, and so this facility is being put in to protect those developments downstream. So we're in the business of trying to protect existing developments from flooding, and this is another project to that effect.
And if I could add, the regional flood control facility to the north that was overfunded because they came before regional flood district in the county already with this facility. Also, a lateral radius, and it's going to be with this project installing a 12-hour reinforced concrete box, and there's a large development at that corner that will be putting in an extensive storm drain system that will be completely developer along the Prius corridor there.
I don't know if you heard that, but there's a development coming into the west of Jones that has to provide their own storm drain system as part of that development that'll be tying into this pipe in Jones. We're just providing a stud to collect that flow, but they'll have to provide their own flood control and their own flood protection for their development, and they'll be able to tie into that Jones system once they're done.
Hey Ed, this is Jim Giordano, and I work for, Party Homes, and we actually have installed some storm drain on Jones Boulevard that will tie into this proposed system from the south. So if you look at Jones, between Levi and Con, we've put in a bunch of storm drain there that will tie into this. For that reason, I'm going to abstain from voting on this item, but just to let you know, there has been a developer contribution to the south for sure.
Any other discussion?
So, yes, this is Larry Schultz, Clark County. So, Steve, just so I understand, when I look at these projects, I always think of them as an element of an integrated valley-wide system. Is that the right way to view this, as opposed to a specific improvement needed because of a development? Is that the right way to look at this?
It's kind of like transmission lines and then just smaller power lines. So we're the transmission. We provide the mainline facilities throughout the county, and then developers and other people come in and they tie into that mainline system. So that's a good point. We are providing that backbone system, continuous system throughout the county.
That's a helpful clarification and a good analogy. Thank you, Steve.
Any other questions? If there are none, staff would recommend you accept the project presentation, item 9A. Entertain a motion.
Jeff Listowka, Boulder City, move to accept.
There's a motion for approval from Mr. Listowka in the city of Boulder City. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay.
I'm abstaining on this.
Steve, I'm not opposed, but I'm just going to abstain from voting on this item.
Okay, so
And James House will abstain.
James House and Jim
Really
Giordano
also
abstain.
abstaining.
Motion carries unanimously with two abstentions. Item 9B is action to approve the interlocal contract for construction. This is an interlocal contract with a total value of $3,650,000, $650,769 for construction management, construction, and entity construction labor costs. There are sufficient funds for this project. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion?
Yes, this is Larry Schultz, Clark County. So this question is probably something that can apply to any of these ongoing projects. Do all of these project contracts and agreements have a provision that in the event that funding is constrained in the future, that we can defund portions of the contract, in other words, slow it down and reduce whatever period of time? Let's say we had a 12-month period of performance, maybe slow it down over 18 months. Of course, I'd understand that if we had that provision, that would probably come at a price tag to the overall agreement. But do we have anything like that?
We have historically, when we approve a project for construction, we have the funds available for that project. So the money for this project is actually in the bank right now. And
Okay.
so there's not a...
So it's,
Go ahead.
yeah, so it's not contingent on future incoming revenue. It's already banked away then.
That's right. That's not true
Was that
in
the-
all cases, but in this case it is. The money is available and in the bank, and so there's no, we don't have to wait for the money to be earned, or however you want to, we don't have to wait for the money to be received through sales tax to fund this. It's already been received, and it's in the bank right now.
So other than this, so my question really wasn't only related to this project, but it was more of a general question that for those projects that are not fully funded or banked away, do we have a funding provision where we could defund or throttle down funding should the need arise?
So most of our agreements with like outside agencies, outside private people will have a clause like that. But generally, I'm under the assumption that if we have the money, then they're not putting those contracts.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. Whoever's speaking, I can't hear.
Okay, this
Steve.
is with the DA's office. Generally, we have, in all the contracts, we have the money most of the time to do the projects. If I'm made aware that there's not sufficient monies in it, then we'll put a clause in like that. Especially, we have those clauses in our outside contracts with private people. So yes, we do take that into consideration depending on whether or not we have the money or not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hey, this is Harshal Desai with City of Henderson. What is the planned bid date for this particular project?
The bid date?
Bid advertisement, what's the current bid advertisement for this project?
The award date is estimated to be September of 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Motion to approve item number 9B, Ron Newell.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor for approval from Mr. Newell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
James Houts abstains.
Jim Giordano, do you want to abstain on this as well, since you did on 9A?
No, I think I'm okay on this one.
It's the same project.
You know what, just to be sure, I will abstain, yes, thank you.
This is more than
Yeah, this is fine. Okay, the motion's approved unanimously with 2 abstentions. Item 10 is Flamingo, Boulder Highway North Charleston, Boulder Highway to Maryland Parkway, and Maryland Parkway System, City of Las Vegas. I want to note for the record that there was an error in the contract on this item and that an ID mile is missing. So we need to add ID mile FLBN0280 to the contract, and we'll do so before the contract goes to board for final approval. Item 10A is action to accept the project presentation. We have Matt Baird on the phone to present this project. Matt, when you're ready, if you could unmute and begin your presentation.
Great, thanks, Steve. Steve, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. As Steve said, my name is Matt Baird. I'm with Atkins, and I'm representing the City of Las Vegas for this project. I'll be referring to the project as the Charleston, Maryland Storm Drain, instead of the mouthful that you see at the top of your screen there. So with that, let's get started. Next slide, please. So this is the general location of the project in the Las Vegas Valley. The red lines represent the proposed storm drain facilities. It is located directly east of downtown Las Vegas. And if we could go to the next slide, we'll see a zoomed in map of the same thing. So on the right side green in the blue line is the Boulder Highway storm drain, which is currently under construction. That project is anticipated to be complete by the end of this year. And the remaining red and yellow lines are the limits of the proposed storm drain improvements for the project. The red lines represent the trunk line flood control district facilities, and the yellow lines represent the pertinent collection storm drains for that facility. Next slide, please. So this is the same slide as the last one. It just shows the sizes of the trunk line storm drain facilities. The downstream end is an 18-foot by 8-foot reinforced concrete box that will connect into the Boulder Highway storm drain, currently under construction. The facility today is about 2,000 cubic feet per second. You can see the changes in facility sizes as you move upstream. The trunk line in Charleston ends as a 10-foot by 6-foot RCB at Maryland Parkway, and the system that goes up 13th Street at Maryland Parkway to the north to Stewart starts as a 12 by 6 RCB at Charleston and ends as a 48-inch RCP at Stewart. And that facility in Charleston at Maryland Parkway, there is a future facility that will extend the storm drain to the west in Charleston past Maryland Parkway and approaches the Las Vegas Boulevard to the west. Next slide, please. So this is a typical section looking east in Charleston Boulevard. There at the bottom of the screen, you can see the rectangular reinforced concrete box, which is fairly deep and is well under all of the existing and numerous utilities in Charleston Boulevard that pretty much encompass the full width of the right-of-way. This section is pretty typical for the full length of Charleston from Boulder Highway to Maryland Parkway, and it is a pretty congested corridor. Next slide, please. So this is the total project cost. A little over 68 million is the current estimate. It is worth noting that the Las Vegas Valley Water District is contributing to the construction. They have included a number of waterline betterment improvements with the project, since we're disturbing the pavement, trying to get everything that we can in the ground that is needed by the different agencies. The RTC is also participating significantly in the construction cost. They will be paying for pretty much all of the surface improvements, which of course mainly is the AC pavement for the roadways and sidewalk improvements. They will also be paying for all the drop inlets and laterals associated with the storm drain. And then the flood control district construction cost estimate is just under 38 million, as you can see there. Next slide, please. The design documents are 90% complete. All right-of-way permits have been obtained, and all necessary local, state, and federal permits, including environmental, have also been obtained. The project award of bid is expected at the end of this year, with construction starting in early 2021, and the construction duration is estimated at 2 years. And with that, I will answer any questions that anyone has.
Jeff Lestofka, Boulder City.
Sorry?
Hi. Just for my general information, you showed a cross-section of Charleston Boulevard. You said there was a fairly congested area. It looked like about maybe 10 different things under there. Is that, what's kind of a normal street? Just a couple, a few, or?
Yeah, I mean, this Charleston is pretty dense with existing utilities. I would say that well, I don't know if there is a standard, but I'm not used to seeing this many utilities in one street. So maybe half of those utilities. I mean, I can tell you that I also worked on the Boulder Highway storm drain, the one downstream that this one connects into, and Boulder Highway was much less congested than Charleston is.
Okay, thanks.
Matt, this is Larry Schultz, Clark County. So I have my standard question I ask after all these presentations. What, if any, significant or concerning design risks exist? And if such risk exists, what are the mitigating strategies?
Well, you know, probably the biggest risk or issue that we see in construction with these type of projects, which of course are almost entirely, you know, underground pipelines that are being installed, is trying to avoid conflicts with existing utilities and infrastructure already in the ground. Obviously none of us have X-ray vision, and when you get a corridor like Charleston that's so congested, trying to make sure that you're missing everything that's already there, and or if you're not missing it, obviously you're designing or incorporating into the project a relocation of that utility. I would say that is the biggest challenge with this project. To mitigate that, we have performed over 300 test holes on existing utilities in the project area, specifically to really identify what elevation horizontally and vertically those utilities are at, so that we can avoid it. We have also surveyed all of the sanitary sewer and existing storm drain that's out there, by taking the lid off the manhole and having surveyors shoot the invert of those pipes at those manholes. Obviously, a lot of the potholes are associated, or the test holes, the 300 test holes that I mentioned earlier, those are associated with facilities that don't have manhole access like that, and that's why we have to essentially dig a hole in the ground to locate the utility. So I would say that is probably the biggest challenge, and I think that we've done a pretty good job of mitigating it by the number of test holes that we've performed and the field survey.
And Matt, again, this is Larry. So I assume that all of that data that has been culminated in those test holes and other surveys have been documented on some sort of a drawing or a set of drawings, and will be briefed to the ultimate constructor in such a fashion that they in turn will be fully aware. And that's probably a standard procedure, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if it's standard, but I have done that on the storm drain projects that I've done in the past 10 years, where on the design plans, we do show the location of the test hole. And then with this project, we actually took it a step further, and there is a plan sheet that lists all of the test holes, as well as their coordinates and the depth to the utility that was potholed at that location. So yes, we do incorporate that information and make the contractor aware of it.
Thank you so much, Matt.
This is Ed Uline. I'm going to appear like a hypocrite here, but this is an area that's well developed for many years. I can remember coming into this area in the 1940s. How did it happen that no storm drain or storm facilities were built in this area? And how is the water, what happens to the water today if there's a storm?
Good question. There actually is a lot of existing storm drain in the project area right now. For example, there is a storm drain that runs the full length of Charleston through the project limits. The problem is that the diameter of that storm drain, it's a circular 33-inch diameter pipe. And as you can see, I mean, the relative conveyance capacity of a 33-inch diameter pipe to an 18-foot by 8-foot box is hugely different, right? So there is a lot of storm drain in the area. It's just not big enough to collect and convey the 100-year event, which of course is our design standard. And I would attribute that situation most likely to the age of this neighborhood. And Steve may want to comment on that after I'm done. In terms of where the water goes now, there are some problem flooding areas in this area of town that historically, when we do get a significant rain, they do experience flooding. I think the city has tried to mitigate that as best they can in the absence of this project. But there are, the water essentially either goes in the existing storm drain system that is undersized, or it remains in the street and is conveyed essentially from east to west through the streets. Certainly a lot of that water goes down Charleston Boulevard. A lot of it turns down Boulder Highway. Some of it may continue east in Charleston and ultimately get picked up by some downstream facility. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you. Well, no, I have another question. Isn't there some median between a 33-inch pipe and a 11-foot or whatever the size facility is needed? Isn't there something between those that could be put in without disturbing all the utilities, or is there no way to do tunneling like that?
You're asking about whether or not the facility could be installed by tunneling? Is that your question?
By replacing somehow that 33-inch pipe that exists. Not with a huge pipe, but with something, say, 5 feet wide or something.
Well, I mean, yeah, that could be done, but it would not meet the design criteria to collect and convey the 100-year flow rate for the 100-year frequency flood event, which is the flood control district and the city's policy that any regional facility has to convey the 100-year event. This is the size of the facility that we need in order to accomplish that. So I guess the answer would be no, there is not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
For a motion? Las Vegas, I'd like to make a motion to approve 10A.
There's a motion from Mr. Starmer to approve the project presentation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
James House.
Herschel Desai, City of Henderson, I'll abstain from item 10A and the subsequent item 10B.
Okay. That motion is approved unanimously with 2 abstentions. Item 10B is action to approve the interlocal contract for construction. This is an interlocal contract in the amount of $41,028,829 for construction management, construction, and entity construction labor costs. We do have sufficient funds currently to fund this project. Staff recommends approval. Any discussion?
I'll approve item 10B.
There's an item on, or a motion on the floor to approve item 10B from Mr. Newell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Abstentions? Partial decide?
James House.
James House. Thank you. The motion's approved unanimously with 2 abstentions. Part 4 of the agenda is other items for information only. We put this item on. Item 11 is receive a report on previous items submitted that were heard and approved by the Board of Directors on April 9th, 2020. This is an informational item for the CAC since we had to cancel our meeting in March because of the pandemic and we didn't have time to get a virtual meeting set up. So we wanted to just provide this item to you to let you know that the items that were on that agenda cycle did go to the Board of Directors and were heard and acted upon at the board. And these items were approved. I'm not going to go through every one of them. If you have a question, I'm happy to answer. Most of them are relatively routine, but just to highlight a couple of them, item 11B was a supplement to the interlocal contract from the maintenance contract with the City of Henderson. Something we don't normally see too often, but they needed an additional $1.6 million to fund some bid contracts for some maintenance projects for existing facilities in their area that were damaged due to storm events and other reasons. And item 11, G and H was a funding contract for a project in Clark County. It's the Duck Creek Haven Street Storm Drain System, which is located north of Cactus and east of Las Vegas Boulevard. And so that project, the construction funding was approved. Anybody have any questions on items 11A through H?
Jeff Lostocco, Boulder City.
Yes, Jeff?
Just a little detail on like the Boulder City projects on the Hemingway system. 2 of them are listed at 99% complete, and 1 is 0. So the 2 that are 99%, those are is the work done or is the money just spent?
So, okay, so you're looking at the CAC status report?
Right.
Yeah, so the first project, the BOU 01C10, that's the design contract. So you see the DES there that says, that stands for design. So it's at 99%. And then the project was split into 2 phases. So the first phase is phase 2A, which was a construction project, and that's essentially complete. The work has been done, and they're, I think, finalizing and closing out that contract eventually. So it'll be finishing up pretty quick. So the third project, the Hemingway System Phase 2B improvements, is the second phase of the construction, which has been funded but hasn't started construction yet. And so it's showing 0 status because they haven't really gotten going on that yet, but they'll be starting on it pretty soon, and then you'll start seeing that percent going up here shortly.
Okay, and that's another one where the money's already in the bank, so there's not an issue with that?
That's correct. Anytime essentially we approve a project, that money's in the bank. We really do that on purpose because we don't want a project that's half done to have to stop in the middle of construction. Because most of our projects are like that one you just saw in Charleston that will have a big deep hole in the middle of Charleston, and we don't want to stop that contractor from working because they can't get paid. So we make sure that
thank you.
in the bank before we approve it.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Any other questions? Item 11 is for information only. There's no vote on that item. Item 12 is comments by the general public. I'll ask Ms. Hughes if we've received any comments.
We have not.
No comments have been received from the general public, so there's no nothing to follow up on that. The next Citizens Advisory Committee meeting is on June 1st, 2020. Hopefully we'll be able to meet in person, but we'll see. We'll let you know what's going on with that. And
So Steve, this is Larry Schultz, Clark County. I just want to compliment you and your team for putting together this go-to meeting, because the format of it actually worked very well, in my opinion. And again, thank you for getting good organization in place and getting the documentation out and having us prepared before the session actually began.
thank you for those
I
comments.
could vote for that one.
I can tell you that setting these types of meetings up is logistically challenging. And so I'm glad it went off pretty good, and thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.